Hello. In this Middle East report, the first place I would like to take you is to a village in Israel by the name of Banyas. In the New Testament, this place is known as Caesarea Philippi. If you've ever been on a Bible land trip to Israel, you probably visited Caesarea Philippi. If you have, you would have seen a large cave on a sheer rock cliff and a spring inside the cave providing the source water for the Banyas River. That river becomes one of the three headwaters that together form the Jordan River. In Matthew 16, you can read about the only time that we know of that Jesus and his disciples came to this location. And it was here when Jesus asked his disciples who they thought him to be. Peter responded by saying, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." It's also here that Jesus tells his disciples for the very first time that he must go to Jerusalem, where he will suffer and be killed, but be raised on the third day. And in Matthew the 16th chapter and the chapters that follow, you can read and follow their walk to the city of Jerusalem. In Banyas, a Byzantine church has been uncovered, one of the early churches ever found. Here's an aerial view looking directly down upon it. You can see that the church is located some 30 to 40 feet directly in front of the cave. Here's another aerial view. The reason I wanted to take you here is because a number of us were there a little over a year ago in November of 2019, and we saw no hint of the excavation here. Here's a closer view of what's been uncovered inside the church itself. All of this has been revealed since we were there about a year ago. Now let's turn our attention to Iran. In late June and early July, there were some 10 to 12 explosions across the country in military bases and nuclear sites. You can see their location on this map. Some have been attributed to human error, accidents. Others, however, were suspicious as to their origin. In the middle of the map, you can see the nuclear enrichment facility at Natanz. On July the 2nd, a massive explosion took place at this site, an explosion that was said to probably be the result of cyber sabotage, most likely by the United States or Israel or both. The explosion destroyed a centrifuge development and assembly plant above ground. We don't know how much damage was done underground, but it is believed to have been fairly substantial. Centrifuges are the instruments used to enrich uranium. In September, Ali Akbar Salehi, the head of the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, said on Iranian TV their intentions of relocating this activity to a new underground site. Satellite photos are showing that they've begun a construction at a site near Natanz. Here's a satellite photo taken on October the 26th. It will take some time to completely build a site like this, so I will keep my eye on it and report any further developments on it in a later Middle East report. Here's a story that I really wanted to share with you. On October the 27th, Israel signed an agreement with the UAE to have Israel pipe their oil onto Europe. The fascinating thing about this is that Israel does have a little used and little known oil pipeline. It is 158 miles in length and runs from Eilat on the Red Sea to Beersheba and then on to Ashkelon on the Mediterranean Sea. The irony of this pipeline is that Iran, yes, Iran, paid 50% of the total cost to build it. Before the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran, Israel had a very good relationship with the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. In 1968, Iran and Israel began a top-secret project to build a pipeline. Why? In order to circumvent the Suez Canal. And Iran agreed to pay half the total cost to construct it. Now, I know that today an oil tanker, depending on its size, will pay between $300,000 and $400,000 for a one-way trip through the Suez Canal. The Israeli pipeline can handle 1.2 million barrels of oil every day from Eilat to Ashkelon. Now it will be used to transport UAE oil on its way to Europe. It seems to me this could be a very lucrative area for Israel. Undoubtedly, other Gulf states that normalize relationships with Israel will want to do the same. For the remainder of this report, I want to add to what I said in our last Middle East report in September. Over the last 50 to 60 years, there have been many peace initiatives that have been proposed for peace in the Middle East. The 1978 Camp David Agreement, 1995 Oslo Accord, 2003 Bush Roadmap, and many others. In each case, each required Israel to give up part of the land that they controlled. Now, most evangelical Christians are against dividing the Promised Land. So when these normalization treaties began occurring with the Arab Gulf states earlier this year, some evangelical believers wondered if it required Israel to vacate any of their land. We can take note that Israel's relationship with the UAE and Bahrain are the only time Arab nations have agreed to terms with Israel without requiring them to give up any land. Not to mention the economic, medical, and technological benefits that would come from such a partnership. If anyone conceded anything in this, it was the Arabs. You can see the Arab nations have taken a risk, as is seen in the backlash that's come from Iran, Turkey, and the Palestinians, all of whom have condemned this new diplomatic relationship. But in doing so, they've also shown their own true colors. I would expect other Gulf states to follow suit, and in the process would further isolate Iran and Turkey, both of which are said to be participants in the future invasion according to the prophet Ezekiel in chapter 38. As I said in September, in Ezekiel 38 verse 13, a number of groups oppose this coming invasion of Israel. It reads, Sheba, Dedan, the merchants of Tarshish, and all their young lions will say to you, have you come to take plunder? Have you gathered your army to take booty? To carry away silver and gold, to take away livestock and goods, to take great plunder? These groups vocally disdain the actions of the invading countries, but don't actually get involved in the conflict. Two of them mentioned here in this verse is Sheba and Dedan. The UAE and Bahrain share borders with southeastern Saudi Arabia and are within the confines of the ancient biblical post-flood setting of the tribes of Sheba and Dedan. You can read about them first in Genesis 10 verse 7. In fact, here's a chart about the descendants of Noah as depicted in Genesis 10. The descendants with their names in green are participants in the coming invasion of Israel according to Ezekiel 38. In red are Sheba and Dedan, who are described by the prophet Ezekiel as among those who protest the invasion of Israel. In other words, Israel's new relationship with this region is another piece of the prophetic puzzle coming together. From hostility to friendship, the UAE and Bahrain are now in a place where protesting the coming invasion is more of a reality than ever before. A treaty like this confirms the setting that will be present at the time that this invasion occurs, according and as described by the prophet Ezekiel. So, what implications are there for Christians today? If we see these prophetic truths playing out before our very eyes, we know that our redemption draws near. Not only is Israel back in their land, but they are flourishing, just as the Lord said and promised that they would be before this future invasion. At some point in the future, I would love to give more information, spend more time on this coming invasion, Lord willing. We are certainly living in the last days, and Scripture is being fulfilled before our very eyes.